All right, let's get into it. Today, we're diving into an Idaho foreclosure case that really makes you think about how our legal system is supposed to work.
So imagine this. Can you actually lose a case before a judge even sees your most important evidence? We're about to find out. What we're looking at today is what happens when three crucial legal filings, full of what the homeowner called damning evidence, were completely thrown out by a court. Not because of what they said, but because of when they were filed.
And that brings us right to the heart of the conflict. This is the case of Jeremy Bass versus two corporate entities, DPW Enterprises and Mountain Prime 2018.
Okay, so the clock is really ticking here. It's just one day before a summary judgment hearing. You know, the kind of hearing that can end a case right then and there, no trial. Bass files what he thinks is his knockout punch, 3 documents detailing his response to the other side's latest arguments.
But then, the court makes this absolutely pivotal decision. It strikes all 3 filings. Now get this, they weren't late. The problem was they were considered an improper reply to a reply. Basically an extra step in the back and forth that the court's rules didn't explicitly allow for. And just like that, his evidence was gone, wiped from the official record.
This is exactly where you see this major tension in our justice system. As legal experts point out, this whole situation really raises a huge question. Is it more important to follow the procedural rules to the letter, or to actually hear the facts of a case, especially when those facts involve serious accusations of fraud?
So you have to be asking, how on earth did this happen? Well, to really get it, you have to understand the massive uphill battle Jeremy Bass was fighting. He wasn't just a homeowner. He was a homeowner trying to fight this thing all by himself.
Bass was what the legal world calls a pro se litigant. It just means he was representing himself. But his situation was a little different. He was perforce pro se, and that little word perforce is everything. It means he was forced into it. It wasn't his choice at all.
And he really tried. We're talking about contacting over 125 law firms to get help. But he was turned away every single time, usually because of conflicts of interest. So there he was, left completely alone to find his way through a legal maze that was built by lawyers for lawyers. And here's the real kicker. In an earlier hearing, the judge herself admitted that the court's own rules were, and I quote, a little convoluted. So if even the judge thinks the rules are confusing, why would such a rigid, strict interpretation of those very rules be used to block Bass's evidence from ever being seen? It's a question that really gets to the core of this whole dispute.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Let's unpack these 3 forbidden filings from October 21st. What was actually in them that the court refused to even look at?
They basically covered 3 huge areas. First, what Bass called an antitrust bombshell that alleged the auction was rigged. Second, he pointed out major procedural notice violations, which called the whole eviction process into question. And third, he had to defend himself against accusations of misconduct. Each one of these was a pillar of his entire defense.
Okay, the first filing was the most explosive. Bass claimed the other side made what he called a felony admission right there in their own sworn statement. He argued they basically admitted to talking with the auction trustee before the sale even happened, a move that, if true, could be a serious attempt to rig the whole thing.
And he pointed to some pretty specific clues. I mean, the pre-auction communication was one thing, but they also showed up to the auction with cashier's checks already printed out for the exact final bid amount. Think about that. How would you know the exact final price in a competitive auction unless you already knew the outcome? It totally undermines the idea of a fair public sale.
The second filing was a much more direct challenge to the eviction itself. Bass basically said, "Show me the proof." He argued the plaintiffs never actually provided any evidence, like a certified mail receipt, to prove they had followed the strict legal steps for serving an eviction notice. And if they can't prove that, their whole case to kick him out is on shaky ground.
And this just perfectly sums up his third point. Bass was being accused of making mistakes in how he cited legal cases. So in his filing, he included this table. And if you look at the numbers, it's pretty stunning. The other side, with their team of professional lawyers, made 8 citation errors. He, representing himself, made only 5. It just goes to show the kind of intense pressure he was under.
But here's the thing. The court throwing out those 3 filings on October 21st, that wasn't a one-time thing. According to the investigation, it was actually part of a much wider pattern of evidence just being pushed aside or flat out ignored.
Over and over, Bass tried to introduce other really important evidence.
We're talking about official police reports that proved he still lived in the house, which was a major point of disagreement. He had audio and video recordings that he said showed things weren't right at the auction. He even dug up evidence of what he claimed was a pattern of similar behavior by the same companies in 6 other cases over in Utah. But every time, this evidence was reportedly dismissed or kept out of the case.
So, why does any of this matter? What's the real-world impact? Well, the consequences of these procedural decisions weren't just theoretical. They were incredibly real and financially devastating for Bass.
With his best evidence now completely out of the picture, the court ruled against him with a summary judgment. But it didn't stop there. The court also declared his entire defense frivolous, and that's a very specific legal term that basically means his arguments had zero legal merit. It was a crushing blow that also opened him up to potentially having to pay the other side's attorney's fees.
And the financial fallout was massive. This one decision essentially signed off on a potential wealth transfer of over $340,000, including over $140,000 in home equity he lost from a single homeowner to a pair of corporate investors. All of this based on a case where the defendant's most crucial evidence was never even heard.
Now, the whole thing has moved up to the Idaho Supreme Court, and the main question they have to answer is whether the lower court got it wrong. Did it let procedural rules get in the way of a just outcome? And that really leaves us with this fundamental question about our legal system as a whole. What happens when the very rules that are designed to make things fair might actually become the tools that stop fairness from happening? When the process and justice itself seem to be in conflict, which one is supposed to win?